A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to everyone. My name is Kaif Aalim-Johnson, and I'm the president of the Prince George's County Muslim Council. I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your Sunday afternoon to join us for this very important discussion regarding what does Black Lives Matter mean to the Prince George's County Muslim community. Everyone knows about the incidents that have taken place recently regarding George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and obviously there's been a lot of discussion around it, a lot of protest around it, and seeing concerns from various corners of our country, the planet even, but from places that have not been typically sympathetic to the concerns of Black Americans here in the United States. People wanting to call for a change, people even being concerned though about, what does Black Lives Matter really mean? How does that manifest itself into action that can be beneficial to making true change toward racial justice and equality in the United States? There's even been issues of the difference between Black Lives Matter as a slogan and Black Lives Matter as an organization and what they stand for. As the Prince George's County Muslim Council, our mission is to get the Muslim community involved in the civic and political affairs of the county. Our dean calls for justice and equality. The obligation of the Muslim is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and foremost in those things in which we are obligated to do, those things which are wajib. But Islam is about things, as the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, is about good advice. It's also about seeking justice. And I will tell you, the Muslims should be in the forefront of these issues, not concerning themselves about are they coming behind what other organizations are doing and how we're feeling it ourselves. If we are taking the action that we are supposed to take, as the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us, when he told people like Abu Zar, when he insulted Bilal based on his race, and he said, you still have a problem with Jahiliyyah, which caused Abu Zar to take an action to eliminate that from himself. When he said that no Arab is better than non-Arab, no Black is better than a white, and vice versa, the issue of erasing these things. For as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught us in Surah Al-Hujurat, Ayat 49, Surah 49, Ayat 13, at the end, when he says, the best of you is he who serves Allah best. So our concern and what we want to talk to our speakers about today is how we as Muslims in Prince George's County can best serve this community to making sure that we are leading the way in racial justice and equality in all things as Allah and his messenger have taught us. So at this point in time, I want to turn it over to our moderator, Attorney Muhammad Ibn Bashir. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wa salatu wa salamu. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. Thank you, first of all, to the Prince George's Muslim Council for inviting me to host this August panel of just good, high quality speakers, people who are actively involved in our community, people who are seeking out answers as well as seeking to implement leadership in our community. Thank you all of our guests for participating, for all of you who are watching. We hope that we can do the topics some justice. We are, as it's been noted throughout the world, a very diverse community. And so I expect that we'll have a very diverse opinion as to a lot of the issues that go on here. Hopefully we won't have a diverse opinion at the end of the day on whether or not Muslims have an obligation to seek justice. What I will say is, first, I'll just do a couple of small cleanup things. It'll be basically a question, answer, follow up. I don't want to play Phil Donahue, but I will if necessary, because I want us to get to the crux of what it is to seek justice and what it is for Muslims to begin to engage themselves in the culture that we currently find ourselves in. So let me just say, for the record here, each person will who is part of this this panel, will give their own bio, I hope. But let me just tell you some of the renowned voices that you'll hear. You'll hear from, inshallah, Imam Johari, Abdul Malik, from Sister Nisa Muhammad, Dr. Hakim Rashid, Sister Ameedah Rashid, Hareesa Mohammed, and Brother Kaif Aalim-Johnson. So inshallah, without further ado, I'm going to first just to give us a little bit of a backdrop, and for those who are joining from outside of the Prince George's County community, I want to give us a little bit of backdrop of the Black community in Prince George's County historically. So with that, I'd like to introduce you all to my brother, the dear Dr. Hakim Rashid, inshallah, he's available. Doctor, you there? Ah, there you are. Assalamu alaikum.
I am here. And I want to try to get this going. Can everybody see that screen?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, good. I'm assuming everybody else can. I thought it was important to talk about the historical context of Black lives in Prince George's County. Many of us have been here for a number of years, and from a personal standpoint, I thought Prince George's County was named after King George when he was a prince, but no. Prince George's County was named for Prince George of Denmark, and he was the husband of Queen Anne, who ruled Great Britain. And this county was carved out of portions of Charles and Calvert counties. So it's important to go back to the beginning, 1696. This is when Prince George's County, as it's named today, came into existence. And here's Prince George and Queen Anne. Prince George, the namesake of Prince George's County. We've got to keep in mind that this relationship between Prince George, Queen Anne, their marriage was a marriage of convenience. It was to unite two imperial and colonial empires. Denmark at the time was a major player in the transatlantic slave trade. The Danish West India Company was chartered in 1671 when Prince George was 18 years old. The British, they had been well entrenched in the slave trade from the time Queen Elizabeth supported the slave trading expeditions of John Hawkins in the 1560s. And it's important to keep in mind that the Piscataway tribe, Native Americans, had settled this area literally for hundreds of years. So it wasn't about anybody discovering Prince George's County. It was about them naming a block of land that had already been settled. Let's take a look at the Prince George's County flag. What does it mean? What is its history? And it's, again, we're going back into European history. The symbolism dates back to the 11th century. The Red Cross of St. George has a long-standing tradition of its own as a symbol of Christian martyrdom since its first use during the Crusades. So again, here we are, people of African descent living in a county whose flag is a symbol of the first Crusades. The seal of Prince George's County. It was designed in the year the county was founded by Charles Beckwith. And take a look at what these four quarters of the symbol symbolize. Queen Anne, France and England in the first and fourth quarters, Scotland in the second quarter, and Ireland in the third. The banner motto, Semper Idem, means ever the same. And that was one of the favorite sayings of Queen Anne, ever the same. So it wasn't about change. It was about staying ever the same. And these four quarters symbolize the major European colonial and slaveholding powers. Slavery in Prince George's County, came from the beginning. By 1800, slaves made up 58% of the population of Prince George's County. I think it's notable that now the population of Prince George's County is about 62% African American. And even when the tobacco profits went down, slaves still represented more than 50% of the county's population. Now, again, several plantations in Prince George's County that are noteworthy. The George Calvert, who was Lord Baltimore, owned a couple of big plantations, Goodwood and Riversdale. Other plantation owners, the Three Sisters in Lanham, Thomas Spriggs owned Lake Arbor in Largo, and former Governor Odin Bowie owned Fairview in Collington. Those of you who are residents of Prince George's County, you know these names. You've seen these names. And acquiring slaves for the plantations was easy since the slave marketplace was located in Upper Marlboro. And it should be noted that that was the major slave marketplace. There were other slave marketplaces located throughout the county. As we move on to talk about the Civil War in Prince George's County, Prince George's County, great sympathy for the South. Prince George's County was part of the South in terms of its plantation economy, a population that was more than half slave. There was no abolitionist sentiment here in the county. One person voted for Abraham Lincoln in all of Prince George's County. And when it was evident that Maryland was not going to secede from the Union, scores of young men from Prince George's County went south to fight for the Confederacy. And we may ask, well, why didn't Maryland secede along with the rest of the South? In the first critical year of the war, it must be remembered, the government in Washington, Lincoln's government, made it clear that Maryland and other border states could keep their slaves if they would remain in the Union. The war against the South in 1861 was a war against rebellion, not slavery. So again, this is why Maryland stayed, why Prince George's County stayed with the Union, because it wasn't a war against slavery, and they were allowed to keep their slaves. But people of African descent rebelled during the Civil War. When slavery was abolished in the District of Columbia in April of 1862, many fled there to freedom. Many slaves also escaped bondage by enlisting in the Union Army. It's reported that Governor Odin Bowie, and we certainly know the name Bowie, that he lost 70 slaves to enlistment in the Union Army in 1863. Now, this is critical. If he had a big enough plantation to lose 70 slaves to enlistment in the Union Army, how big was that plantation? We've got a history of lynching of Black men in Prince George's County. These are a few of the more noteworthy ones that took place in the 1800s, the post-Reconstruction period. These are the ones that have been documented. And I'm sure that if we dig deep enough, we'll find that there have been other lynchings of Black men in Prince George's County since then. I want to leave a couple of questions for us to consider. In light of this history, is Prince Georgian an identity that people of African descent really want to embrace? Secondly, is Prince George's County still a viable name for what's supposed to be the most affluent majority Black county in the United States? Is it time for Prince George's County to have a new name? And what role should Muslims of African descent in Prince George's County have in that renaming process? You know, many of us here in Prince George's County, we've had a lot of experience with name change, particularly at a personal level. All right. And what would changing the name of Prince George's County signal to the rest of Black America and the world? I don't expect us to come up with any answers to these questions, but I just wanted to put those out on the table as we talk about the context of Black Lives Mattering historically in Prince George's County. And with that, I'll close.
Thank you, Sheikh. Appreciate it. But before you go, let me just pose just a short question here, because I think it's something that is profound and will help us segue into the real crux of the question, which is, what does Black Lives Matter mean to the Muslim community here in Prince George's County? And that is the concept of slavery in Maryland, and whether or not the war of Civil War was actually a war against slavery, or whether it was a war to preserve the Union. And I think you kind of hit on it, but I want that to come across clearly. Maryland could keep its slaves as long as it did not rebel.
Right, absolutely. And I think that's important, and we have to always keep that in mind. Maryland was a slave state, but Maryland was not a state that seceded from the Union. And there was great concern on the part of the government in Washington, because Maryland basically, Prince George's County basically surrounded Washington, D.C. So to have Maryland become a part of the Confederacy would have put the Confederacy right at the doorstep of Washington, D.C. And the federal government didn't want that, so they had to have this buffer zone.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. So let's just get right into the topic by addressing the topic head on. And Sister Nisa, are you there? There we go.
Yes, I am.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum
How are
salam.
you? It's always a pleasure to see you.
No, my honor.
Do us a favor, give us a little background of who you are, what kind of work you do, and you can even shout out that you made me look like a giant a couple of times in my little bit of a career, and I appreciate everything that you do in the community. But give us a little bit of your background, and then just start us off by answering the question: what does Black Lives Matter mean to the Prince George's County Muslim as you see it?
So I am Dr. Nisa Muhammad. I'm the Assistant Dean for Religious Life at Howard University, and I work with some amazing young people on the campus of Howard University. I work also the pleasure of working with Dr. Hakim Rashid as well. I work with the faculty, staff, and student population there at Howard University, and we have had the pleasure of inviting you to the campus to also work with our students as well, to share your knowledge and wisdom and understanding. And I think that, of course, Black Lives Matter, because for Black Muslims, there's no way to separate who we are as Black first from being Muslim, because Black Muslims have been racially profiled and surveilled for being Black. And so there's no way to separate who we are racially from who we are as being Muslims. Our Black bodies are surveilled by the police. Our children, our Black sons and our Black daughters are surveilled by the police. And so Black Lives Matter, absolutely. I work with students who are stopped by the police often, just because they are Black. It does not matter whether they are Muslim or not. Just because they have a particular faith, it's inconsequential. Just because they are Black, they are stopped by the police. And sometimes just because they are female and because they are Muslim, they're treated differently. And so Black lives absolutely do matter. And the thing is that we have to begin to help Muslims to see that because we are Black, it does matter. And, there's a saying, text without context is a pretext. Mm-hmm. We have to be able to see that the situation and the historical context of Black Muslims is a unique situation. Mm-hmm. And when people come to America, they cannot think that the situation of Black Muslims is the same as people who come here from another country. It's not the same. That we have a unique history, we have a unique situation, and they have to begin to see the uniqueness of our situation and begin to understand who we are and what we are, and begin to recognize the uniqueness of our situation and to begin to treat us accordingly.
Sis, thank you. But Imam Johari, let me bring you in here, inshallah. You heard Sis say that there's no way to separate the Blackness from the Muslim. And does that fly in the face of all that we learned in Islam? Because I'm online, I'm in debates all the time with Muslims who are telling us that there is no color in religion, there is no race in Islam, that race theory or recognition of race theory is anti-Islam. Some even said even the thought process that you would talk about race is borderline haram. So do you see that with, as described, the uniqueness of the Black struggle here in America, do you see, as she suggested, that there is no separation, or there should be or can be no separation between the Muslim and the Blackness?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Muhammad, I want to be clear. Individuals who have given us this line of reasoning, either they're ignorant or they're traitors, right? Because and I say traitors, they're traitors to their faith, because our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his khutbah wada was impeccably clear with regard to this state of urgency. I mean, he said, "I fear that I will not be with you next year, so have an attentive ear to what I say." And then he raised 3 issues, and maybe people miss these 3 issues. The first one is economic exploitation. The second one is sexism. And then he talked about reminding them about that Islam is based on 5 things: to believe in Allah as messenger, to pray, to give charity from their wealth, to fast, and make Hajj once in their life if they're able. And then he calls into the question about racism. Now, if the Prophet ﷺ is going to use the last khutbah that he has, talking to over 100,000 people, and raises those 3 issues, then anybody who tells me otherwise, either they're ignorant, they don't understand Islam, or they're traitors. That right now, there is, without a shadow of a doubt, the most critical issue facing the world today are the issues that the Prophet ﷺ raised 14 centuries ago. And if we don't deal with them, we're going to perish. And I say this with all of the understanding that Buni al-Islam wa al-Hams, Islam is based on 5 things, and that a Muslim is a brother, sister to every other Muslim, whatever color they are, right? That's not the issue. The issue is, for me sometimes, there are people who are not Black, who would like to minimize being Black and then benefit from the fact that they say they're a minority, right? And you know who I'm talking about. So I mean, we need to be impeccably clear. Malcolm said in his message to the grassroots, they don't lynch you because you're a Republican or because you're a Democrat or because you're a Baptist or Methodist. They lynch you because you're Black, right? You and I have to get over it. As much there's some Negroes who want to be Arabs. They don't want to be Black anymore. So they like that. They drink that Kool-Aid, all the way down. The reality is Allah made me Black for a reason. And the time right now for us to stand up and say, I am Black and I'm proud to be Black. Allah made me Black. And alhamdulillah, I chose, after 400 years of them trying to remove systematically Islam from us, that we're going back.
So when you say,
before we got here.
So when you say traitor, is it your suggestion that if someone who is attempting to be an ally is saying Black Lives Matter, but the emphasis on the Black, the emphasis on the Black is problematic for them and they're Muslim?
Come on, brother. If there was a land called Black, we wouldn't have a problem. Mm-hmm. Palestinians can be Palestinians. Mm-hmm. Afghans can be Afghans, right? The Syrian task force can talk about the problem and the crisis in Syria, no problem, right? Mm-hmm. If you and I say Black has a problem or Asabia, right? They're out of their mind, right? They're out of their minds. Who are they talking to, right? Maybe they think we're stupid. I'm not saying I'm woke. I'm right. You got to be woke. You got to stay woke. But Muhammad, I don't want to hog up. In fact, I don't hog at all after I accepted this one. But
camel.
But there you go. Oh, and by the way, when you introduced my sister, I'm the one before her as a Muslim chaplain, but she's Dr. Nisa Muhammad now.
Doctor.
I mean, she's still our sister.
No doubt.
And she's still my captain.
Alhamdulillah.
Dr. Nisa Muhammad.
Thank you.
But I just want to be very clear that we are in a state of emergency. It is the state of urgency that the Prophet ﷺ talked about. This is our time. Our people are looking for leadership. Mm-hmm. And we are more qualified than probably any other people, with the benefit of the Quran, the benefit of the example of the Prophet ﷺ, and the benefit of 400 years of struggling in this country, right? That we ought to be able to tell people, look, this is what needs to be done, and to get over it. And I know there are people who have been telling my relatives who are Christian or something else, oh, stay away from the Muslims, you know. They were telling them that the same thing when Dr. Rashid was talking about. They were telling them that on the slave ship, stay away from the Muslims, because if you get around them, you're going to be in trouble. It took 200 years to remove Islam from the enslaved African. 200 years later, Islam is the fastest growing religion, especially among those people who are oppressed. So are we supposed to be in the mix? Yes, sir.
Remind me to come back to you when we get to the issue of what I consider to be racism, white supremacy, on just the point of trader. Okay, so don't let me forget it. But in the meantime,
but I'm telling you now, I think we need some modifiers. We need the scholars among us that it's not just white supremacy; it's a 1% white supremacy system, because there are white people who are exploiting other white people so that they can exploit the rest of us.
We're going to address that. We're going to address that, because in the concept of Black Lives Matter, there's always this thing like that comes out as all lives matter or blue lives matter, or everything else is lumped in. So we're going to address that and the concept that how they're created. So let me move on to Sister Ameedah. Sister Ameedah, are you there with me?
Yes, I am. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sister, are you a doctor as well?
No, I'm not a doctor.
MashaAllah. I always feel like I'm talking to a doctor when I talk to you. So alhamdulillah, I feel healed, I can tell you that.
Alhamdulillah.
Let's deal with this question. What does Black Lives Matter mean to Muslims in Prince George's County?
Well, first of all, let me just say I'm not a doctor, but what I am is a mental health clinician. And I've been a mental health clinician for about 40 years. And I've dealt primarily with people within our own communities. And when I say that, I mean within the African diaspora. And I think that puts Black Lives Matter in a very different context than sometimes we may think of it. But I think it also addresses the kinds of things that why Black Lives Matter is a very unique, why Blue Lives have a different kind of, why you wouldn't lump it with Blue Lives Matters, because, and I'll say why in just a second. But I currently work, I'm in a private practice at this point, and I work primarily with individuals, adults, who are healthy adults, who are having distress related to relationships, personal and family relationships. And when I work with anybody, you're dealing with the whole system, the person system, which means generations. If a person comes in, you're not just talking to that person, you're talking to 3 generations up, at least. And that's because my training is systemic and family. That's just the approach that I've always used. But why that's important in terms of Black Lives Matter is I kind of go back to a theory that I guess a lot of us are probably familiar with, called post-traumatic slave syndrome, which is really the work of Dr. DeGray. And she really deals with the fact that many of the things that we say that makes African Americans or people of the African diaspora more susceptible to the impact of stress, of health, and as Imam Johari said, economic distress, educational problems, housing, just you can go down the gamut. Birth rates, our birth rates, death, infant mortality is higher for us. Heart attack is higher, hypertension, you name it. Everything, every issue that you can think, well, why is that? And how does it affect? It affects our lives. It affects our children, it affects parenting, it affects everything. But one thing that we don't really deal with, I think, in the context of where we come from is where we are. And the work of, I think that what Imam Johari spoke to has to do with, we think of Black people sometimes as just Black Americans or people from the Caribbean, but there are people that are all over the globe, many of which who don't know that they're Black. They think they're Arab, they think they're Indian, they think they're Pakistani, or whatever, until they come here and they realize, we're having a comparable experience, but they've had a comparable experience, not like slavery, which makes ours very unique, but the idea of being able to not see yourself and the worth of yourself. Because one of the issues that happens when you are an oppressed person for generations, for hundreds and hundreds of years is that it affects how you see yourself. It also, you begin to internalize the beliefs that a system has put on you. And yes, Black Lives Matter, because those views are being taught, transmitted subconsciously.
But sis, let me interrupt. It's been 400 years. Come on, get over it. I mean, come on, you're not slave now, are you? I mean, come on, it's been 400 years. Come on, you got your own job, you're a professional. Look at you. You killing the game. Come on, why can't you just get over it?
It would be very nice if that were the case, but we could almost say that if you look at us around this round table, even physically, we think that we just have physical characteristics that are transmitted. We don't. Personality, there are also things within our psyche that are transmitted. But more important, trauma, which slavery, if you don't think slavery was traumatic, and you don't think all the years that came after it was traumatic, then maybe we could call me, I'll give you an appointment. But reality is, it was. And it's clocked into our psyche, it's clocked into our bodies. We actually store trauma, we store stress, and we reproduce it. There are actually many alternative interventions that are used. I know I use something called metamorphosis, which is a different kind of, but it deals with what happens when a person is pregnant and they're carrying trauma. And a child is born into trauma, and a child is raised into trauma, and a child that they know, and by the way, this isn't just our own little theories. The United States government knows this. I mean, there have been all kinds of research studies that go way back that tell you that stress that happens is generational, and you have a higher propensity for all kinds of health issues, mental health being one of, we always like to think of mental health, but mental health is holistic. And the bottom line is, and I know the rest of the panel would agree, spirituality and where we sit with that has a lot to do with mental health. You can't separate them. So yes, Black Lives Matter.
Let me bring, is Hareesa there?
Yes, I'm here, Brother Muhammad.
Hey, Assalamu alaikum, Hareesa Mohammed. How are you?
I'm good, alhamdulillah. It's so nice to be here.
Look, I have children your age, and we debate these kind of things all the time. And it always seems to me that the youth have a different, or I don't know if it's more energized expression of it, but a more emotional attachment to issues like this. We, in my age group, we have what I consider to be like an intellectual / historical attachment to it. But the youth have on the ground, feel it each and every day, kind of an expression of these kind of issues. So tell me, from your experience, first give the audience an opportunity to get to understand who you are, and then tell us from your perspective, what does Black Lives Matter mean to Prince George's County Muslims?
So I was born and raised in Prince George's County. I was born in Bladensburg, and then my family moved around the county, but I've always been an active member of the Prince George's Muslim Association in Atlanta, Maryland. And I attended Charles Herbert Flowers High School, which is a predominantly Black high school in PG County. And then I went on to attend the University of Maryland, College Park, which is a predominantly white institution in College Park. And I'm currently a project engineer at Clark Construction, which is a nationwide general contractor that is known for a lot of construction in this area. They built the FedEx Field Stadium and a lot of other hotels and hospitals in the area. But the company is predominantly white. So I myself have had to learn how to navigate corporate America, being Black, being Muslim, and being woman, and trying to understand what social groups I fit in, how I can be myself and be proud of myself in those social groups, but also not compromise my deen. So I think that's a lot of what our Black youth are facing these days. When we're with our Black friends, how do we make sure that we don't compromise our deen? When we're with our non-Black Muslim friends, how do we make sure we call them out when they make racist comments? when they joke about their parents telling them to come inside when it's sunny outside so they don't get dark. Why does that have to be an issue? Why do we always have to be on guard when we step out of the door? So I think another thing that the youth are coming to terms with or having to face is that all of a sudden Black culture has become some kind of new cool, where our culture is being misappropriated. Black culture was born of resilience and stamina and digging deep into our roots to find our strength. Other people don't get to profit off of that. So that's something that we're also realizing when it comes to music and fashion. How do we make sure that it's not something that's being culturally appropriated in our community?
Mm-hmm. Very good, very good. So the concept of appropriation is something I'm going to address with you a little bit later, because with your peers, you probably have the most people who are Muslims who are from other cultures, as opposed to my generation. My generation, it was me and my family and the Jabber family, so now you can look almost every corner and find a Muslim somewhere. But your generation is like University of Maryland. I mean, you can bump into a Muslim, like in every corner there's an Ahmed or a Faiza or something like that. The conversation, is it different as it relates to the concept of Black Lives Matter? I mean, has the conversation adjusted since George Floyd within your peer group?
I think within my direct peer group, I've started seeing more allyship and people reaching out and actually wanting to understand, what does Black Lives Matter mean? How does that affect people of color, Black people specifically, and what's the next step? What's the next step forward? So I've noticed that a lot of my non-Black Muslim counterparts are calling out other people when they say things that just don't make sense. And one thing that I noticed in our neighboring county, Howard County, our Darul Taqwa, the masjid, during one of their board of directors meetings, which was a couple of weeks ago, sometime in June, the ex-president and general secretary, his name is Adnan Khan, made a very insensitive comment about Black Lives Matter. And it took a very long time for the board to issue an apology, and the apology was just a blanket statement that had no substance. So just having that support from non-Black Muslims to call out this comment that was completely insensitive and racist, having people come together for one cause to make sure that people are aware that this is happening and this needs to stop, and we can't keep having these issues in our masajid. We can't keep covering things and wrapping them up under blankets and just throwing them under the rug. This is the time, this is the moment for us to come together and bring everything to the light.
Calling out, is that important to you?
Say that one more time, Brother Muhammad.
Calling things out, is that important to you?
Yes.
Okay. Let me get a brother Kaif in here. Kaif, are you there?
Yo, yeah, what's up?
Alhamdulillah.
Assalamualaikum.
Hit me. Tell me. I mean, look, you part of that youth movement, the ones that are out there in the streets. And well, first of all, before you even say anything, how many of us have participated in one or more of the protests? Raise your hand.
I now know what tear gas feels like. So,
mashallah. Dude, look, you know what? You wouldn't have experience. You could have called me. I would have told you what it was like in 65. Mashallah. But yeah, okay. Tell me, what does Black Lives Matter mean to the Prince George's County Muslims from your perspective? And again, introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kaif Johnson. I think that Black Lives Matter, at least, I think Michael Che explained it the best in his stand-up, where he was like, people are arguing like Black lives are better than other lives. It's like, no, we're just trying to say that, hey, we matter just as much as you. And for a lot of people in this generation, like the difference between, I think, not even the generation, but what's going on currently compared to like what happened in the past, like people might protest for a weekend and then stop. There are a few differences now compared to then. For one, I think for a lot of people, it started in 2012. Trayvon Martin died. One of the reasons I'm wearing a hoodie right now, besides my hair, is to represent that. When Trayvon Martin was killed 8 years ago, So imagine you're a 10-year-old. You're a black 10-year-old. You see that happen. In 2013, he gets acquitted. That's when Black Lives Matter was officially formed as an organization. 2013, after he was acquitted. So now you're 18 years old. You see the George Floyd thing happens. The big difference between being 10 years old, where you can't do anything, versus 18-year-old, where you're finally technically an adult. And so now all those people from the ages of like 15 and up are now fighting and protesting daily. On top of that, we have a pandemic. So while people were going to work before, a lot of people are no longer in work. So they have nothing better to do but fight this fight. So it happens daily, all the time. And if they are working, they're working from home. Like I can work from home during the day and then protest at night and figure it out like that. Like what's going on in Portland right now, that hasn't changed. And I think that that's what Black Lives Matter has. Black Lives Matter started out being about police brutality, but it has since evolved to talk about all aspects of Black life, whether it's maternity rates, Black trans people being killed. It's just talking about, hey, we matter on every level, not just in police brutality, but in general. Black people matter. We deserve to live. We deserve the right to life as anyone else.
So are you? So let me play the bad guy on this. So are you suggesting that that Black Lives Matter is there a disconnect between the Muslim community and Black Lives Matter that is associated with the agenda of Black Lives Matter, or is Black Lives Matter a slogan, an organization? What is your understanding of Black Lives Matter in that context? Because you mentioned Black lives on all aspects, the trans aspect, this, that. Mm-hmm. But when you look at Black Lives Matter as an organization or as an organizational framework, I'm not even sure if it's an organization, there's a lot of Muslims who are Black who have a problem with it because they seem to have a focus on other issues like trans issues and an LGBT agenda. This is the way it's described. So are we people who are locked into the slogan that is the concept that Black Lives Matter and we need to promote that, or are we talking about an organizational framework that we can get down with?
For me, I think of it as, I think it's the slogan first and the organization second. I think that the slogan is just like a general idea, like, hey, I matter. If I'm walking down the street, I shouldn't die. Like I'm a man with a degree, no priors, nothing like that. I've lived my whole life generally the right way. So like if I'm walking down the street, I shouldn't be a target, but I am. Now, in terms of the LGBT stuff and its relation to Islam, I always look at it like picture yourself as a Black person, just in that light, trying for acceptance, not whether or not you agree with their lifestyle, because that's something else. That's not what we're here to discuss. But just whether or not you think that they deserve to die, that is not up to you. Well, whether or not someone lives or dies is not up to you. That is up to the Lord. Like you can't, like suicide is haram in our religion, like because it is not up to you. Your job is to be like, hey, this person deserves to live, and you never know what can happen over the course of someone's life.
Mm-hmm. All right, so you've been out there. All of you have at least have seen some of the organization. You've seen some of the rallies, etc., and you've seen what started out as heat over George Floyd with Black people in the front, and then now you're seeing it begin to make an adjustment. Now you begin to see the rainbow, etc. And again, I know I'm not the only one who has heard the conversation about whether or not this is a LGBT organization, etc., that is moving an agenda separate and apart from making the argument that Black Lives Matter, and therefore it's interfering or co-opting what the original intent of it was. Imam Johari, weigh in on that.
You know, because I'm a Muslim, right? I got to remind people. As a Muslim, I follow Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right?
So.
When he was living in Mecca. Mecca, they had prostitution, drug dealing, slavery, female infanticide, you name it, they was doing it, right? He joined with them in something called Half al-Fudul, a confederacy for the common good. This is before his prophethood. Years after, his companions asked him, and they didn't ask him the way like Muhammad would ask him, so Muhammad, now that you're a prophet of Allah and you have Islam, if they ask you, the drug dealer, the prostitution, the gambling, right? If they ask you to sign to work for the common good in the society, would you join them? He said, even as I am a prophet of Allah, if they call me to join them, I will join with them. So anybody who give me that job, I'm saying, okay, I know what you mean. You mean you don't really follow Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Because if you did, then you would do in the Mecca that we live in today, you would do what he did in the Mecca that he lived in yesterday. Is that clear?
That's very clear. And I had this conversation with some students at Howard University, and they brought the same issue to me about, well, they, support, gays and lesbians. And I said, you know what? Howard University has gay and lesbian students. They have a club for gays and lesbians. So you might want to drop out of Howard University if that's an issue for you, because we have students here that are gay and lesbians. There are gay and lesbian clubs. And if that's the issue for you, you might want to drop out right now. Because if you're a student here, there are students here that are that right now, and the university supports them. So if you don't want to be around them and you don't want to be involved with an organization that supports that, you might want to drop out of Howard University right now.
So, our stance on justice, does our stance on pursuit of justice conflict with other agendas on the pursuit of justice? That is, as Muslims, does the Prince George County's pursuit of justice conflict with anything that you've seen in Black Lives Matter as a slogan or as a movement that you would say, at least I have to back up from that?
I don't.
No, I think we got different things though. Let's be clear. There is something called the slogan Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm.
There is a movement that has absolutely nothing to do with how you have sex.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Thank you. Thank you.
Around the reality of the crisis that we're facing, right? And there are people who would like to distract from this. I mean, if you want to put somebody on Front Street, okay, the two young ladies that I understand started the organization called Black Lives Matter, they was lesbian, right? If it was such a big deal, how come somebody straight didn't come up with it? Right? Right? I mean, if you want to criticize people, right? You was late to the party, brother, and now you're going to complain about how much it costs to get in. The price of freedom is to be on the table, dealing with what needs to be dealt with, and then afterwards we'll deal with the other stuff later. As long as working for justice doesn't mean I have to give up my own values. Mm-hmm. As I understand it now, BLM is saying everybody come.
Right.
Hakim, why is it so hard for the culture?
Straight, gay, whatever you are, right? So that we can deal with this issue of justice, right?
Get your engineer to turn Johari up so I can make sure I hear everything that he said, because it's profound. Hakim, why is it so hard for the culture to wrap its head around the concept of Black Lives Matter? I mean, you've heard I know you heard all the other people, but you've also heard what's going on out in the street. You heard the gay lesbian thing. You heard the white lives matter. You heard the all lives matter. You hear these kind of things flowing. Why is it so hard for the culture to wrap its head around the concept of Black Lives Matter?
Now, when you say the culture, who are you talking about?
American culture. Huh? Whatever culture.
Whatever. Well, we're in this multicultural society. Mm-hmm. And I think that, again, part of the problem is this lack of historical awareness, historical understanding. If you go back to the civil rights movement, for example, you didn't hear anybody talking about Bayard Rustin being gay. It wasn't an issue. He had an agenda that was common with Martin Luther King, with John Lewis, with the others. You didn't hear anybody talking about James Baldwin being gay, because his writing spoke to Black people and the relevance of Black people to the world. So you know, we have short memories as a people. You know, our culture has a short, our American culture has a short memory. And that's why it's so important for us to dig deep, not only into African history, to Islamic history, and to the history of Muslims of African descent, to understand that there have been these common causes that we've all come together on, regardless of our personal issues. You go back to the Harlem Renaissance, you'll find a lot of gay people within the Harlem Renaissance, but we still revere the Harlem Renaissance, you know. So let's keep these issues separate. You know, the areas where we can come together on, let's come together on. Where we diverge, let's diverge. You know, but when we start talking about Black Lives Matter, that's just a truism. That's just a truism. Human lives matter. You know, and what's happened is that this culture, this American culture, has disentangled Black from human. You know, and that's part of the whole slavery process, to dehumanize people of African descent. So we've gone through this entire historical process of just regaining our humanity. The humanity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us was stripped from us from generation to generation. When you've got a situation where a white slave master can sell your children, can sell your wife, can sell your parents to some other plantation owner, you know, your humanity has been stripped. So this is what we've, you know, Black Lives Matter is just another iteration in the effort of Black people in America to regain our humanity. That's the way I look at it.
Sister Hareesa, tell me, when you're speaking with your contemporaries, when you're speaking to or with the youth, are they understanding the concept of how history connects with, how the past connects with the present, especially as it relates to the Black experience, on the concept of Black Lives Matter?
I think those who have read up on the history do, but those who are more in tune with whatever is happening in the moment are just focused on what's happening in the moment. So it's a matter of making sure that people are rerouted to the resources that they need to really understand the history of the Black experience in America, and specifically in Maryland.
The reason why I'm posing that question, Sister Ameedah, is to me it seems like it's anti-intellectual when you start talking about all lives matter. It's like you just wanted to gate this argument. And if it is that, are we just locked into a culture that is entrenched in denial of who Black America, or what Black America is and what Black America has contributed? Sister Ameedah?
Ameedah? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm listening and I'm kind of thinking about some different things also as you're talking, because I think that we're talking about Black Lives Matter. We're talking about PG County. We're talking about America. And yes, you opened this panel saying that there's diversity in our culture, as you can see on the panel. And the reality is that's very true. And I think that Black Lives Matter is being framed in the context of America, and American racism. But let's go back to the origins of and this is not an organization, it's a movement, just like the Black Power movement, which was there were other things going on that were progressive. And Black Lives Matter, if you look at even the people, and you mentioned them, Johari, two of them were lesbian, but one of them was not. One of them was a Nigerian immigrant. Definitely wasn't lesbian, and but one thing that they shared in common, whether they were talking about gender issues, was systemic police brutality.
That's right.
That's why we're seeing a connection, a global connection. And I think we see this in America firsthand. But we also know that our police and the brutality of our police stems from a warped mentality of white supremacy. Now, you also say that Black people are affected by the other systems that also affect us, but it's also global. That's why when you look at Brazil, and you look at other countries that have identified with the Black Lives Matter movement, What they're identifying with is systemic violence toward people who are oppressed, specifically of color. And when we start thinking of ourselves as Black Americans, and we as Muslims can bring this to the forefront even more, we have an African diaspora. We're not just Americans. I mean, we have, this is a land base we live in, but we're global. We worship globally. And I think one of the problems that many of, how can I say this? Johari, you always say this so well. But people from other cultures that happen to be of the Islamic faith, I don't know how you're supposed to say that politically correct. But sometimes you get caught up in a mentality that where they're oppressing themselves, where they have brought into a mentality that they're special because they're not Black American. But they're Black.
Right.
They, you know, look at the hues, you know, look at the, not just the skin, but the oppression that people suffer in India, in Pakistan, in Arabia. You look at their heritage is our heritage. So part of what we need to do is like, yes, we are in an American context, and I agree with the young brother. I know about there's a place and a space for all of us here, but part of it needs to be a global reach, because the Howard students, they're global. You know, if you're connecting with somebody from Guyana, from Brazil, from all of these other places, and connecting them to University of Maryland, you know, to those people. Okay, so yeah, Black lives matter, human lives matter, but you know what? Where's the origins of people anyway if it's not out of Africa? Let's get real here.
Well, absolutely.
Where can you go and not see a Black, if you want to say Black, but an African presence, right? Even in terms of intellect. And yes, there is a Black country. It's called Sudan. And you know what? It was before Egypt. Those are Black people.
Oh, I better address that too. But Kaif, tell me to see it. Look, you've grown up in PG County. I've known you since you were like knee high to a grasshopper. But I also know PG County because my kids went to school here. So I mean, give me. I mean, how do you navigate? Have you had to navigate the concept of explaining or recognizing the difference that there's a difference in the way Black kids are treated? And if you haven't seen it versus have seen it, let me know. But if you've seen it, explain to me how it is that you then navigate and help the people who are seeing it, or challenge the people who are doing it to understand that Black lives matter.
So growing up, I actually did not experience it that often. Like I had to actually take a step back and remember a time when I experienced it. And I remembered it happened when I was in the 7th grade, and it didn't happen to me. My friend Chinua had just gotten his hair braided. He just like started the process of getting dreads. He had an afro for years and was like, you know what, time to switch it up, and finally started getting his hair braided. And after Salah, I went to a Muslim school, guys. So yeah. So after Salah, the principal came up to him and was like, you have to change your hair. So his father, when he was picking up, came to the school and was like, did the prophet not have braided hair? That was the end of the conversation. He never had his hair.
MashaAllah.
And then when my brother first got his hair braided, they asked him to do it. My brother took his out, but not because they asked him, because his were a mess. So it was like an entirely different thing.
It was a personal thing, right?
Yeah, it was more personal then. But like then I went to Roosevelt, and I didn't really experience that because Roosevelt's a mostly Black school. Most of the students were Black. I didn't really understand racism until I got to college. Like I went to Penn State, and Penn State is like a ghost in a snowstorm. It is that white. Like Penn State is white as I don't know what. Like, so that was my first time really experiencing and seeing racism for like the first time. And I wouldn't say I would experience it from my teachers. I didn't experience it from my teachers. A lot of my teachers were actually very much so the opposite, and I'm still very close to a lot of them. But I know that like currently there's a whole thing on Instagram called Being Black in Penn State, where a bunch of Black people just send anonymous things talking about their like racial experiences that they had there.
Mm-hmm.
So
how do you advise them? How do you talk them around experiencing things so that the people, either the people who are white as snow in their Penn State or black as coal in their essence, get to the point to where they understand that Black lives do matter, especially being in Prince George's County. It's here, so that
it's harder if they're a white male. Mm-hmm. But if there's something else, you kind of attack them, not necessarily attack, but talk to them from that perspective. So let's say they're a white woman. You'd be like, all right, what about blah, blah, blah being a woman? And then they'll explain how they're negatively impacted. Then you hit them with the Black thing. Let's say they're gay, you hit them with that, and so on and so forth. It's when they're a white man and let's say they're a well-off white guy, that it's harder for them to understand it because they've never experienced anything bad, like really like negative in their lives. The only example that I have that I've used was from Get Out. Mm-hmm. I was like, because a lot of people have seen it, and I'm like, have you seen Get Out? They'll say yes. They'll be like, at the end of the movie, when the cop car pulled up, why were you scared? Mm-hmm. Because if you haven't seen Get Out, basically this white family captures this guy, and by the end of it, he kills the entire family. It's just him, and you see him over the body of a white woman who's just been killed. And then a cop car pulls up. And as a Black person, you're like, crap, he's done. They don't know. They're obviously going to believe he just murdered all these people and that's it. But then it's his friend who pulls up and it's a great ending. But I'm like, that moment, you know why you're scared for the main character in that movie. And that's Black people all the time.
That's so I saw
I try to use pop culture references because that helps, or even I'm like, because a lot of white people listen to hip hop, right? Mm-hmm. Like do you just hit them with that? Like, do you know what they're saying? Like, are you listening to what they're saying? They're telling stories. They're telling you about their lives. It's not necessarily a glorification or anything. They're saying, this is my life. This is how I lived. A lot of like NWA said at the police years ago. Mm-hmm. People are still saying it. Why do you think they said it? It wasn't out of nowhere.
There you go. Like, see, that's my next question, Dr. Nisa. Would we be having this discussion but for the violence? I mean, we got 400 years of mistreatment of Black bodies. We got lynching, and you name it, we have it. Would we be having this discussion of Black Lives Matter and the seeking of allies? Would allies be coming to us and questioning but for the obvious acts of violence that have been observed?
Absolutely not. Were it not for the death of George Floyd, were it not for the recording, were it not for the world seeing it over and over again, no.
And I'm talking now specifically Prince George's County. Would we be having this discussion in this county, which is, as Dr. Rashid said, majority Black? We would be having this discussion.
No, because I remember growing up, my grandfather told me, do not get caught in Prince George's County after dark. Because, and I was petrified then, because it is a racist county, and this was decades ago, that Black lives do not matter in Prince George's County, and we lived in Montgomery County then. So no, we would not be having this conversation because Black lives have not mattered in Prince George's County. We would not be having this conversation. Black lives have not mattered in America. Black lives have not met, specifically in Prince George's County. Black lives have not mattered in America since the onslaught, since the enslaved Africans have been brought here. Black lives have not mattered, and that's why the people have been saying we need to let people know Black lives need to matter. Dr. Rashid talked about regaining our humanity. That's why we say this, because we're trying to let people know we want our humanity back. It has been stripped from us. This is not about somebody else's all lives matter. We know other people's lives matter, but what about us? Mm-hmm. What about us Black people that were stripped of our humanity during slavery? Our humanity was stripped from us, but now we want to let people know we want our humanity back. Give us our humanity.
We are trying to do that in a system that is vast majority of the education, of the thought process, of the media, etc., is controlled by white narrative. I mean, even right now, if you were to ask about the indigenous Arab who was with during the time of Rasulullah, most of us think that there's somehow some separation based on color. The vast majority of them were black. But we have this within our mindset based on the indoctrination that we have, that somehow maybe Bilal was the only black guy. When I mean, Umar was black. Abu Dar was black. Mashallah. Ayman was black. The first martyr was black. Over and over and over, you see these. But we have within our framework, when you talk about reclaiming our humanity, is that we are in a multicultural setting here in Prince George's County, to where many people don't see the black experience as being an experience other than having developed here in America, and they can't connect the dots. One girl told me maybe a year ago that Islam came to America with El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. I said, hun, I was Muslim before El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. You know what I mean? But that's the mindset. So when we're dealing with other members of our community, we have to, if we're going to take the lead in this, we're going to have to bring other Muslims along. How do we do that, Imam Johari? How do we stop them from being traitors and make them allies?
I mean, I hope my audio is better. Is it any better, Muhammad?
Yes, it's better for me.
Well, alhamdulillah. I think the first is that we have to learn how to be allies to ourselves. You can't expect somebody to be an advocate for you if you're not going to be an advocate for yourself.
That's excellent.
And so with that, I'm part of an organization called Muslim Anti-Racism Collaborative, or MuslimArc.org. That's a plug. Working within our own community to deal with the issues of racism, and then within that context to be able to train our allies what allyship means and what their role as an ally is. Because sometimes we have well-meaning liberals who get it twisted. And so it's important that there be some retraining, not only of ourselves in terms of how to deal with systemic racism, unconscious bias, people who have power, other people who exercise their influence on a personal level, and others who have systems of racism. And so at the bottom of it is not only for us to learn to study how racism works, the nature of racism, and then how to become advocates to teach people how to be anti-racist. It's not just enough for them to be, oh, I'm not racist. Okay, fine. What are you doing to dismantle the 1% white supremacy system? Because that's what is at the end of the day. And fundamentally, I'll say, Muhammad, the other piece is that if we want to be able to address issues around brutality, around equal access, equity, it's about power. I think Sister Ameedah mentioned earlier, she used the word Black Power movement. This is not a pity party. Those who are working in many chapters around the country with Black Lives Matters are looking at the issue of institutional racism and how to build community-based power to respond to the system. The system only responds to power. It always has. This is Frederick Douglass. It always has. It always will. And so if we look at PG County, the work of PGCMC is to build power among folks in Prince George's County so that then they can exact from their government exactly what is due them. And that means if you're not making the agenda, you're not at the table, it means you're on the menu. So I encourage people, if you're not a member, if you live in PG County,
you ought to join PGCMC, whatever it is. Go to their website, find out how to get involved, how to get engaged, so that we can build some community-based power. There are communities like, I have many Jewish friends, and in the Jewish communities, some young people, instead of getting a arrest record, they get community service. They don't get community service because the police officer likes them or because the judge likes them. They get community service and expunge record or no record because they have power in their community to demand justice for their children. If we want what they have, then we ought to be willing to do what they do.
Understood. But now, Hakim, isn't the history, though, the real Black community to build power? Other communities step in to crush our power so that they can hold on to theirs. Always fearing that our power will transplant their power.
Right. Well, I think we've got to say what is it that's holding us back psychologically? We have, if we look at the wealth, now here we are in Prince George's County, nominally the most affluent, predominantly Black county in America, but at the same time, the county that was hit the hardest by the housing crisis. So there are these paradoxes there. One of our biggest issues is the ability to pool our resources. Part of that comes from us not trusting each other. And that not trusting each other is a direct result of that plantation history, that plantation experience. I didn't get a chance to include it in my presentation, but I was reading about one of the big slave revolts that took place here in Maryland. I think it was 1739. And again, it was another example of a slave revolt being betrayed by another enslaved person. So we have to unite. We have to unite psychologically, psychoculturally, and believe in our own hearts and souls that Black lives matter, because the stripping of our humanity, it wasn't just the perception of our humanity by our slave masters. It was a stripping of humanity amongst ourselves psychologically. We begin to question our own humanity, our own worth as human beings. And we had a lot, we made remarkable progress, remarkable strides, post-Reconstruction and beyond. But we're still at a point where we don't want to support our businesses. We don't support our banks. We have at one point, the Black American economy would be considered the 9th richest economy in the world if it was a country in and of itself. But so little of that, comes to bear. Now we see some flickerings of hope. We see Black billionaires, for example, wiping out the debt of certain Black college students. So we're beginning to see examples of things that we can do to come together, but we just have a long way to go.
Sister Ameedah, what does it? What is the long way to go? What's the? I'm feeling Imam Johari saying that we have to be our own. We have to deal with ourselves first. And we have to be our own personal advocates. But what's that transition like? I mean, how do we become our own personal advocates and still function in PG County with the creation of allies? How does that work for us? How do you see that working for us?
I think I was really glad to hear it said that change begins within yourself,
right,
first, and I think it also begins with recognizing that there's something wrong within ourselves and that we can work on, because it's not easy, but we do talk about racism, systemic racism outside ourselves, but we also internalize that. We internalize that in terms of things that we don't start, we don't complete, we're not a part of, we don't trust, our sense of self, our sense of our value of ourselves. But also, now we're going through a period similar to the 70s where everybody's got afros and locks and wonderful hairstyles. But the reality is, you buy I don't know how much product to make them look like that. Who's the product? I mean, the reality is who we are, I don't think that we have really internalized our own self-worth, because we have, after generation and generation and generation, have internalized an external warped mental illness called white supremacy. And I think one reason, and I hope I don't, I always have to be careful how I say these things. I always kind of look down to those people who do so much interfaith work. But I was raised a Christian. I was raised a Catholic. And so let me just do my own experience. I don't talk about anybody else. We had a white Jesus. We had an image of something that was divine, other than ourselves. And honestly, when I look at many African American communities, that hasn't really changed. And what does that have to do with anything? It has a lot to do with it. The fact that we can, as Muslims, say God in ourselves that is reflected has no color, and that the examples that we follow look like us. I think that's significant. But how did we get to anybody else on this panel that maybe reverted, as they say, to Islam? How did we get there? We got there through education. We got there through socialization in small groups with other people, that we had relationships and trust. So that's, to me, everything comes back to developing self through relationships. And that's why I love what I do, because it is about relationships. And so small relationships, the beauty of COVID-19 is it has stripped away a lot of the distractions. Right. They even call them in Canada social bubbles, where you come together with people you can interact with, and you learn to trust them and work with them. And then, so we talk about the color renaissance and our great past, to see Black members of the movement that is very similar to movements of the past in some ways. But one of the differences is we don't have social clubs like they used to have before they had the internet. Well, now we can. And listen to what Brother Johari did. So I'm glad I got his number. So, what do I join? Because I can do other things on the internet, but the thing is, you have to connect. You have to be in relationships with other people. And we have to recognize, I believe personally, that there really is a need for healing. Because anytime you suffer the way we have suffered generationally, we can't pretend like we okay. I got a Lexus, I got a this, I got a that, I'm okay. So and I think in Prince George's County, I don't want to, I've only lived here, have we lived here, 16 years now? I came here with Terrence Johnson issues in the paper. So this is a crazy place. But the reality is, what I see that's crazier is all of this wealth that goes into something other than self-development and more into the physical development and what you drive and where you live. And that crosses, and Johari, I know you know that, it's in our community too. It's in all communities. Other faiths. That's Johari's word, other faiths. It's our faith too. So I think we have to really look within ourselves and connect with people that can help us grow and change and be educated.
Very good. I've got a theory. I want the young people to address that. Dr. Nisa, Hareesa, Kaif, this is my theory. I was ready to try a case one time, and it was an Arab. He was and I want to say Euro Arab because there really are something called Black Arabs, in case some of us didn't know. And the vast majority of the Arabs during the time of Rasulullah were Black. But I'm going to visit his family, and he asked, his family is there to meet, etc. He's a defendant, and he says, his family says, "Are you Muslim?" And I'm like, "Yes," and you coming from America, you kind of get insulted by that particular question. I'm walking around with a name with Muhammad ibn Yahya Bashir. It's kind of hard for you to think that I might be something else, but I'm playing the role because I got my shirt and my tie on. And so he says, "When did you become Muslim?" And trying not to be insulted by it, I know you all heard it, but try not to be insulted by it. Like, when did you convert? Like, being a convert is less than being born into Islam. I don't know where that came from in Islam. But so I say to him, do you think that Allah was merciful in Cairo and not merciful in East Orange? That's the only answer that I gave. But my theory since that time has been, and this was years ago, so I worked on this theory, is that Allah's mercy has placed us here to lead. Because we are born in the belly of this beast of racism, white supremacy, and of destruction. And Allah has allowed us to push through the ground the way they put cement on top of a seed and it finds its way to the surface. Mm-hmm. And that strength allows us to be the next generation, which means your generation, of those who step forward and take the lead on moving the culture forward, especially here in PG County and then outward. Do you see the future of Muslims who are Black under the banner of Black Lives Matter? Do you see that becoming a reality, that where the culture, whether it be Prince George County, nationally or even internationally, recognizing that justice can only exist when Black Lives Matter? Any one of you? Let's start from Kaif. You were the last person I talked to, so let's go with the first. You now become the first person.
I definitely do. So one of the things that social media has allowed with our generation that your generation didn't is much further reach. Like right now, on one of my Instagram pages, I have literally the ability to reach Malaysia, London, Pakistan, and literally all over the world. And so when BLM first happened after George Floyd, I actually did like an entire story about it, like where I explained the history of Black people from slavery and on, where I, not like the history, but the everything they did to keep us down, systematically, and then people shared it and it made other people understand what Black Lives Matter was about and how this isn't just about George Floyd. It's about a bunch of stuff just coming up under him. That was like you know, the pot was on the stove and it finally just went open and everyone's upset. So what it did was allow a bunch of people to, I guess, empathize, sympathize, and understand what's going on and have them fight it. Because like before we were just fighting here, but now when you saw the protest in Dubai, they were protesting in the Philippines, they're protesting in Japan,
Belgium.
Yeah, they're protesting everywhere. Like I have a friend in the Netherlands, she was out there protesting. A friend in Germany, I was out there protesting. So they were protesting everywhere. Like it's not just here. So I do see that future. Will it happen during my time? Who knows? Possibly. Yeah. But I do see us approaching it and getting back there with the help of social media. Another thing social media has allowed us to do is, like Sister Ameedah said, when she was growing up, she had all these views of whiteness as being divine. With social media, everyone can be represented, despite size, religion, race, or anything like that. Everyone can be represented and feel a sense of love, like, oh, that's me, when they look on screen. Mm-hmm. Like the way that Black people felt when Black Panther came out. Mm-hmm. Everyone can feel like that.
Yeah, mashallah.
So I do see that coming.
I'm stealing your pot on the stove metaphor, so keep that in mind. I'm stealing. It's stolen. I'm done. My next summation has that in it. Sister Hareesa.
I like to just echo what Kaif said. I think social media has really played a huge part in the Black Lives Matter movement, in that news is shared in an instant. It can backfire because sometimes the news isn't accurate, but when it's backed up by facts and actual research, it's very effective, because you can say, look, okay, you don't believe me? Here's X, Y, and Z to back it up. I think another thing that is moving us in the right direction is just the search and the knowledge for more education. I think when I started out in my career, I had a bit of imposter syndrome, which is basically when you feel like you don't really belong in a space because you feel as if you're inadequate or unable to really accept that you've accomplished what you've done and that you've made it this far because you worked hard for it. So I think being able to uplift our counterparts and our youth in accepting the fact that they are right where they're supposed to be, and that change comes about when we take a step and we continue taking steps forward and we don't stop. So it doesn't end here. It doesn't end with this discussion. We have to keep moving forward. We have to keep pulling along more people with us. And I think we can take a good, we can make good use of social media in terms of how wide our reach can be. Information that is accessible to people who claim that they didn't know X, Y, and Z, and just being able to communicate with each other quickly and rapidly and getting that information across.
Alhamdulillah. Dr. Nisa, you know that's been my stick, that we were born, we were built, put in this culture by the grace of Allah to lead it. Do you agree? Are we ready? Are we ready to establish that Black Lives Matter and move the culture forward?
Yes, I totally agree. And the students of Howard University are really seizing on this opportunity. And so one of the things they have done is they are connecting with MSAs at other predominantly white institutions. And what they're working on is creating like what they're calling healing circles, because they know that Black Muslims at other predominantly white institutions suffer under the oppression. And so they are connecting with Black Muslims, and they're creating a program where they can work with the Black Muslims at other institutions and bring a program for them to work with the other Muslims there to bring their story so that they can help heal the other Black Muslims there. Because what they're finding is that Black Muslims at other institutions are trying to secede from the MSA and start their own institutions. Like at NYU, they have the Black Muslim Initiative. At University of Pennsylvania, they have what's called Pensapolo. At UVA, they're threatening to secede. And so it's a really difficult situation for Black Muslims at these institutions because of the racism. And so Howard University, Black students, Black Muslims are working with, using this opportunity to work with Black Muslims at other institutions to help them heal from the oppression that they're suffering from. So yes, it's a golden opportunity to make some significant progress.
One last thing. I want to say your kids are a good example of this, Brother Muhammad. Your kids, like you have Sadia, who is the poet who is published. Imani just published another thing in Teen Vogue last week of Nadira, the comedian. You have Dean doing leftist, and then you have Naeem who's doing his training thing.
Yes, absolutely. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah. So like especially the success of Imani and Sadia, like through social media and how that's grown, and like now Imani is like everywhere.
Yeah. Well, alhamdulillah. May Allah continue to bless them. I just tell them they anywhere in that success they sneak in a dua for their dad. That might be helpful. So now we got maybe about 2 minutes to go. So what I want everybody to do is just give me a summary. Black Lives Matter to me because Dr. Hakim, Black Lives Matter to me because short. Yeah.
Black Lives Matter to me because I'm Black, my children are Black, my grandchildren are Black, and I would imagine that they would continue to be Black well into the future. And so again, all I want to be about is the process of regaining our humanity.
Yes, Black lives have always mattered, and the issue is we have to make sure that other people see the necessity of understanding that Black lives have always mattered, and that is not our problem; it is their problem. They have to see the Black lives have always mattered.
Absolutely. You know what we got, and that's why the education is so important. There's not one aspect of America, one day in America, where Black people didn't move the culture forward, whether it be by slavery votes that forced the law, whether it be by petitioning or protest, whether it be by a criminal case or a constitutional issue. I mean, even those kind of things. I mean, your Civil War, all of them are directly related to the pushback of Black lives in the building of this particular culture. Kaif, Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter to me because we're people and we built this. Without us, like Just think about culture without Black people. It's so boring. God, like there's just nothing. So you're welcome, guys.
I gotta get you some Mandrill records so you can see, get you some Mandrill records. You sound like me on that one. Can you imagine America without Black people? By the way, I'm writing that in a novel, so you all look out. Go ahead, Sister.
Black Lives Matter, and they've always mattered because we've been here, we are here, and we'll always be here.
MashaAllah. Very good. Sister Ameedah?
I would say Black Lives Matter because we are the core of civilization. Black culture began with Black people. And I don't think, like you said, and everybody else has said, there will be no continuity, creativity, and most of all, the core of spirituality you will find in all Black cultures. So yes, Black Lives Matter, definitely.
Just to ride that before I go to Imam Johari to sum it up, if you go back in Islamic history and just really read your Quran, and you read the descriptions that Rasulullah ﷺ gives of some of these prophets and what they do, Yusuf, Aswad, but where does he go? Africa. Rasulullah ﷺ, where does he send his people? Africa. Musa, where does he go? Africa. On and on. Suleiman, where does he go? Africa. Over and over and over. The interconnection between the so-called Black man and Islam is so inherent in it. So for you to be prejudiced as a Muslim or to not understand the connection between so-called Black and Muslim is like you don't even read the Quran that's staring you in your face. Johari, am I
going to Africa after that.
Am I too off?
You're on, brother.
Black Lives Matter means what to me? Black Lives Matter means
Allah made me Black.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah.
Right.
I don't know where Jamil is, but we are at 1 hour and 31 minutes. We promised the people we'd be here till 4:30. It is now 4:32.
I see Jamil.
And I just want to say thank you all for your perspective. I think that Prince George County is blessed to have you all here, and I was blessed to meet you all. And I didn't know any of you other than here except Johari. We met at Howard. And again, so that Howard, I mean, this is what we do. But the concept of Black Lives Mattering, it's an expression that has to come from us, through us, by us, and the world has to stand up and take notice because we are standing up and making them notice. And I think that is the profundity of what's happening right now, that we are standing up to let them take notice. And as Muslims, we have the doctrine to be able to lead. And inshallah, with our prayers and our guidance, this culture will move forward. Brother Jamil, I hope we did you some justice, and the Prince George's Muslim Council some justice in this conversation. And I hope it moves some people in the right direction. We could use allies, but we also need to be, as you said in the beginning, the leaders that we were meant to be.
Well, Jazakallah Khairun, Brother Muhammad Ibn Bashir. We thought about doing this program and said, well, who should we have on? And we talked about the moderator. I remember your comments at our law enforcement and the Muslim community program that we did in 2015. And so I said, this brother does this very well. Let's have him on. But I want to give thanks to three. Obviously, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Secondly, to all our speakers and their points of view that they bring. And obviously, there are multiple points of view that can come at this issue. Dr. Hakim, particularly want to mention, I love the history thing. I should have had that as a class. That was a great beginning to the program. All right, Johari, HU, because obviously you got yourself and Dr. Hakim and Dr. Nisa Muhammad, alhamdulillah. Sister Ameedah, great to see you. Kaif, I'll see you at the dinner table at some point. Allegedly, I've been talking about getting involved. Alhamdulillah, this can't be the end of it. But I also want to particularly thank Sister Andesha Rahim, who was the type to not really get on camera, but she was the key organizer of this program. It was her idea, and it was her organization, her outreach that got this done. And always you have behind the scenes, Brother Jabran Ali, who set this up, who's running the StreamYard program and has this running. And I've checked them both on Facebook and on YouTube at the same time. So you can see it somewhere. If you didn't see it here, you can see it somewhere. But I just want to end by saying Our work is also about the issue of building institutions. It's not enough to have a moment where people are protesting and then we're doing a lot of these things on social media because we can't get together all the time. It's about a movement, which means building institutions to address these issues. It's about building institutions to improve our economics, to improve our political savvy and our political influence. It's about institutions to build our education so that we understand these things that you have brought forth. So I'm asking, as the president, those people who are on the air, many of whom were RSVP'd before, and some of you who may have come on late because you didn't RSVP until a little while ago, but I appreciate you doing so. There will be a recording of this on YouTube. A recording of this should also be on our Facebook page. So I'm going to ask you to, go to our website, pgcmc.org, and become members, make donations. The point is to build an institution that affects the politics, the economics, the education in Prince George's County. Muslims are supposed to be leading on these issues of racial justice, not figuring out if we fit behind some other group or we can work with some other group. That should not be the issue. Because if we see the problem in front of us, we're supposed to say there's a problem in front of us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through his messenger, has guided us on how to deal with the problem. Let's go and address the problem. Not wait to see, well, if somebody else is doing it, maybe where they're doing it. And obviously, these issues of how people live their lives, we're clear through the guidance of what is halal and haram. And we know that. But we shouldn't be waiting for somebody else to do it, then decide based on what they're doing it, if we can jump in or not. We're supposed to jump in both feet first with the guidance that we have been sent and doing it the right way. So I want to thank everybody again for coming on, but go to www.pgcmc.org, become members, offer donations, but also offer your support and assistance, the knowledge that you bring, the abilities that you bring, so we can build as an institution that makes a difference and becomes a sadaqah jariyah for all of us. Jazakallah khair, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum
assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And I did take a picture of all of you. MashaAllah.